Hi, you guys. This is Crystal Hill again. I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about how your internal reality becomes the external form. But I wanted to explain it to you guys in a visual representation because a lot of times when we see things visually, it's easier for us to grasp the concept. It's easier for us to wrap our mind around it, so to speak. What you have in front of you is a visual representation of a 4D cube. And the 4D cube rotates in on itself, as you can see. But I chose this image because for me, this image is the best so far that I've seen of representing how your thoughts, feelings, and actions actually create the world around you. And so, as the scripture tells us that, God necessarily doesn't judge us, we judge ourselves. We create our own heaven and our own hell. And so that's why in scripture, Jesus was really big on the internal reality versus the external form because as the story goes, people were big in not doing the wrong things, not committing adultery. However, lust was still internally. And so what Jesus was basically saying was as long as it's on the inside, it will manifest on the outside. So regardless of whether you actually commit the act of adultery, just the act of lusting after a woman in your heart will in turn produce the act of adultery in your external world, though it may not necessarily be committed by you. He was trying to teach, or as the story goes, the story nevertheless is trying to teach that there are invisible strings from you that are tied into your world. In the same way now that there's a movie coming out, I can't really recall the name of the movie, but the movie is about a young lady and she finds out that there's some huge monster out in the world, but the things that she do, the monster does. So there's a point in the movie where she's dancing and she's looking on her phone screen at the monster, and the monster is doing the exact same moves that she is doing, as if there are invisible strings between herself and this monster. And so in the same way, there are invisible strings between you and your world. So I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to kind of point out some of the points of this 4D cube so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Okay, as you can see here, there's two cubes. There's an outside cube and there's an inside cube. I know y'all can see that cube on the inside. Now the cube on the inside represents you. The cube on the outside represents the world, everything within your field of awareness. Now, of course, in the world, there's much going on, but this cube here just represents what is within your immediate awareness, your little world, per se. Now, if you notice, the inside cube has it has bars that are attaching it to the outside cube. And in the same way, you being the inside cube, you have invisible strings, for lack of better terms, that is connecting you to your external world. Not only connecting you to the external world, but actually creating your external world and influencing your external world. Now, your thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything that is said to make up your spirit, the thing that we cannot see. The only way we see your thoughts, feelings, and emotions is if you manifest them through the use of your body to us some kind of way. Otherwise, those things are hidden out of view from us. We cannot know your thoughts unless you express them with your voice box. We cannot know your feelings unless you express that some kind of way through your body, some act of anger, redness of the face, some way you have to manifest that for us to be able to see it. So it's hidden within the internal box. But as the scripture says, everything which is done in the dark will come into the light. And so the darkness is considered your internal, because for all intents and purposes, it's dark to me. I cannot know what's going on within you, which is the darkness. But as the scripture says, everything done in the darkness internally manifests itself to the light externally. Or an occultic axiom that they use is as within, so without. So I'm going to press play, and as you watch this 4D cube rotate, I want you to notice how the internal box becomes the outer form, the outer world. Now watch this. You see that? Now, totally different position. In this position, let me draw it here. This outer box used to be the inner box. Now, I'm going to try to leave that there. And watch, it's going to do it again. Internal box. It becomes the screen on the outside, and now it wraps around. You see that? See how that internal box comes out and folds over the new internal box. It becomes the external box. It becomes the screen, and now it's wrapping around, and there's a new internal box. So the external becomes the internal, and the internal becomes the external. And if you know anything about occult knowledge, that you know that the ancients of all times have symbolized this world and human beings as a snake. First of all, because a snake sheds its skin. And so even looking at this box, you can see it has somewhat of a shedding effect. It looks as though it's shedding. Not only that, but if this box were to be on the ground, you can imagine it moving forward in the same way that a snake does. It kind of slides across the floor, and you can imagine this thing sliding across the floor. Not only that, but if you look at it properly, you can see that this is how everything grows. Everything grows from the inside out, even a flower. A flower blooms from within itself, and then there comes the petals to flower out. And so in the same way, you can look at this. Let me press pause here so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. You can look at this area here like the part of a flower that gets pollinated. I can't recall the name of the proper name of it right now, but and then these are the petals, and you can see how, now watch when I press play, you can see how the flower grows from the innermost point outward. Okay, so watch. You see, and that's exactly how a flower grows. But in the same way, this is how you grow. Look, the box in the middle represents you, and the outside is your world. But even deeper than that, even on a smaller scale, you can even look at this as, let me press pause. You can even look at this as the outside box being your body, and the inside box representing your mind. So in the, it's a very good description, because this is how we view ourselves. We view our mind as inside the body. But what you don't realize is your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, which are attributes of your mind. And by mind, I more properly mean not your brain. I mean more so your heart, your sacred heart. That thing which is at the heart of everything. It's at the very center, which is why it's considered the heart. That's why we use that phrase, at the heart of the matter, at the very center of the matter. So the heart is more properly the mind than the brain is. So nevertheless, you can look at this as the thinking processing, reasoning, rational mind within the body, and how the properties of the mind in turn become the properties of the body. And so, in scripture it says that reprobate minds receive the just recompense in their body. And this is how this happens, which is why it's more important, according to scripture, in all ancient cosmology, theology, philosophy, and every other osophy. It is more important to make sure that you have the right thinking than it is to have the right doing, because doing is part of the body. Thinking is part of the mind. But what you don't realize is that your thinking becomes your doing. It becomes your doing, and not the other way around. Your doing affects your thinking, but is the thinking. Watch the way in which this rotates. Started from the beginning. Watch the way it rotates. If you notice, your thinking becomes your doing, and your doing affects your thinking. You see that? The outside box is doing. The inside box is thinking. Look how your thinking becomes your doing. And that doing now, look how it's folding in and becoming your thinking. And so here is the process, what we have called time. Time, as they said, is an illusion, because you are actually going nowhere. You believe you're moving, you believe you're progressing through time, and you're actually in the same exact place you've always been. In the same way, when you look at this cube, it looks as though it's moving. And especially so if you're the outside cube, if you look at that, it's passing up things. It feels as though it's moving, and it's actually not. This is the illusion of time. You're in the same place that you've always been. Okay? But this is a good apt representation to show you the entirety of what is going on within your small sphere of awareness, and how you directly contribute to the world around you. So when they say that you really can't blame no one but yourself, this is why. This is why. Because you create your reality. So thank you guys for... one more thing before I go. I did want to say that scripture, even though y'all don't like to look at scripture, scripture has everything you need if you know how to read the symbology properly. Scripture says, the Apostle Paul told us, before we even realized there was 4 dimensions, if not more. Again, because this cube is 4-dimensional, and I'll show you why. Because it has actually 4 dimensions. From every point, let's say this is a point. From every point, there's 4 directions in which to go. 1, 2, 3, and there's a bar over there. And even if I take, maybe this will be a more apt point, because you can see one direction, that's 1 dimension, another dimension, another dimension, and another dimension. So there's 4 dimensions here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So from any point on this cube, there's 4 directions in which it goes. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So that's what we mean by 4 dimensions. So the Apostle Paul in scripture, before they even recognized that there was 4 dimensions, we know that we're 3-dimensional beings. That's what we were all taught. We're actually 4-dimensional, if not more. Science now says, I think it's up to 11 dimensions that they believe, but nevertheless, we have 4 spatial dimensions. The Apostle Paul says that he wished above all things for us to know the breadth, the width, the depth, and the length of the love of Christ, or the love of God. And so there we have 4 spatial dimensions, even within the scripture: breadth, length, depth, and width. And so again, as scripture always has been correct, and ahead of science, even when scripture says, it talks about the thoughts of the heart. We've always associated thinking with the brain, but we have come to find out that the heart itself actually does thinking. And when I say heart, a lot of y'all are thinking about that thing within your chest that pumps fluid around the entire body, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. But for all intents and purposes, we live in a four-dimensional space, or we're four-dimensional beings nevertheless, and this cube represents how we basically how we work. Hence where you get the term for some of the game consoles, the Xbox 360. Look at this. This is the true Xbox 360 degrees, because that's exactly what happens. Your internal thoughts, feelings, and emotions make a 360 degree rotation. So thank you guys for joining in. Thank you for listening. I hope this helped explain a little bit to you guys about basically how your mind, your internal, creates your external, and how that which is done within the dark always, always, always come to light or manifestation. Thank you guys for listening again. I hope y'all have a good day.